Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. As BC keeps a close watch on our wildfires, thousands are arriving from Jasper, Alberta, fleeing a fire burning close to the popular tourist town. We'll speak with someone who left in the middle of the night with her family. And we're asking, what do wildfires mean for the future of tourist spots? Does tourism need to change somehow to adapt? In half an hour, cash is no longer king, but should it be mandatory to accept cash as payment? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Now, if you're looking for the latest local information on wildfires in your area, you can go to this website, cbc.ca/BC Wildfire Info. Now, the Alberta government says at least 10,000 residents and visitors were forced to evacuate from Jasper National Park as a wildfire roared into the area last night. Stephanie Gertz and her family fled Jasper after receiving an emergency alert on her phone, and she joins us now. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I appreciate your taking the time. I can imagine how stressful this must be for you right now.
Yeah, you know what? We're used to road trips. So it's been about 13 hours. We got about 13 hours on the road and about 4 hours of sleep. So it's a bit less sleep than we're used to, but we're hunkering down and we're making the most of it.
Can you tell us where you are right now?
Yeah, we're at Rocky Mountain House. Just would be east of Jasper, about 4 hours.
Yeah. Can you take me back to last night, Stephanie? What happened?
Yeah, so we all went to bed early. We had done a lot of hiking last night. We got 2 young children, so we ended up going to bed a bit early. My husband and I, we put our phones on silent. It's just something typically we do. Now we know not to do that in Alberta or BC because it meant that we did not get the alert when it was actually sent out. I, for some reason, woke up around the time the alert happened, but just right afterwards, and just happened to look at my phone and noticed that there was an alert saying there was a forest fire that will be in Jasper in 5 hours.
Right. Okay. So you actually had the alert that said the fire would be in Jasper in 5 hours, and they changed that later on, right? To just saying that you needed to leave in five hours.
That's correct. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what went through your mind then?
We're from Ontario, so forest fires, we didn't really know how fast they can move. We didn't really understand how bad the smoke can be. When we went to go leave our room, the sky was covered in smoke. There was actually ash falling from the sky, and so we hopped in our car immediately and took the route that they suggested, only to find that it was gridlocked. So we actually ended up going 3 hours or 3 kilometers in about 3 hours. And then by the time we hit the main intersection, it was around 4.5 hours. We went probably about 10 kilometers. And so we're looking at our watch and saying, well, they told us to be out of here in 5 hours. But yet it looks like we're still going to be here. So it was, pretty stressful. And we were trying to keep the kids calm. We were listening to podcasts. They were still awake because they didn't want to fall asleep yet. And because there was a fire to the south and fire to the east, we're kind of stuck in the route that we had to go. They thought we had to go, but because the route to the east became more controlled, they actually turned us around because we were supposed to go to Canmore. So they turned us around instead of going into BC. So we evacuated out of Jasper that way, but that means that we went straight through the fire.
What did that look like?
Yeah, so we didn't realize how close the fire was to us, and that it would have been really dangerous, I feel, if the fire had actually still been in full blaze, because it was only maybe 5-minute, 10-minute drive from behind the traffic that was sitting in gridlock. When we drove, all the trees were burnt. There was flames. The trees were on fire, and that there was, just kind of lots of debris, coated everything.
And meanwhile, you have these two kids who don't want to sleep. I mean, how were you trying to keep them calm?
Oh, my kids are pretty resilient. I love them. They just kind of, yeah, we talked about it, and we we stayed calm, so they stayed calm. And
Yeah.
so we also were listening, like I said, we were listening to audiobooks. So if anyone hasn't done audiobooks before, we love them. Stuart Gibbs. So they just listened to 5 hours of audiobooks, and it really helped them to calm down.
Right. Keep their mind on something else. And you said that you're from Ontario. You hadn't thought about the prospect of wildfires.
Nope.
No. Does this change anything? I'm sure not even thinking about the future, but any kind of impact might this have on this might have on travel plans for the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my husband and I are planners. And so we planned everything. We planned, a variety of hikes, how long they take, what are the routes. I planned out what the weather was going to be on each day. I planned out what our meals would be when we go to the grocery stores, when we buy food. I did not consider forest fires. It wasn't on our radar. And, when you look at all the websites and how many forest fires are happening right now in Alberta and BC,
Mm.
it was actually pretty shocking that it's not more prevalent in the advertising or in what groups are or what I guess websites are suggesting you should look at in the summers. That,
Mm.
yeah, consider wildfires, because we are a family that tends to do long hikes. This trip we didn't do it, but normally a 5 or 6 hour hike wouldn't be that abnormal for us, and there's a lot of area there's no coverage for Wi-Fi. So what if this happened during the day? What if we'd been on a 6 hour hike and
Right.
we would have been caught in, who knows, not knowing where to go or,
Mm.
how to reach safety. So emergency preparedness and fire evacuation is definitely going to be on our radar for planning for our next trips.
Mm. Oh, where do you go now? What is your plan, if any?
Yeah, so we're heading to Canmore. So we're gonna follow up our trips now with going to Lake Louise and Lake Moraine and continuing on with our itinerary. It kind of creates that standard consistency for our children so that they know this is not, life altering right now for us, that we're going to continue the conversations and how they feel and what, how they felt last night. They didn't get to bed till about 3:30, and then they only slept for 3 or 4 hours. So again, it's just going to be kind of an opportunity for us to discuss these type of things, because I
Mm.
don't feel this is going to be something that's not going to happen in the future.
Mm.
I think forest fires are definitely becoming more prevalent, and who knows, maybe they'll start up, more in Ontario.
Well, Stephanie, do keep track of information in Alberta as well as you continue with your trip. And I do appreciate hearing from you. And I'm sorry that this is not the family vacation you had originally planned, but I
You know
wish,
what? Life happens. You
yeah.
know what? And forest fires is so it's so part of the life of Alberta and BC.
Mm.
And we're so thankful that we were able to, get out of the situation very safely.
Very glad to hear that you're safe and your family as well. All the best to you, okay?
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Stephanie Gertz is a tourist from Ontario who evacuated from Jasper last night with her two kids. Now, Parks Canada is responding to multiple wildfires in Jasper National Park. It calls it an evolving and dynamic situation. Alberta residents, if you're in BC right now, you can follow the Alberta Emergency Alert app and the website for further information. We're taking your calls on this. You heard from Stephanie, who's a tourist, and residents are affected as well. So, with tourist season coinciding with increasing wildfire seasons, what is the impact of wildfires on the future of tourism? Does tourism need to change in light of wildfires? If you're planning a trip, does it become a concern for you? You can call us now, 1 800 825 5950. 604 669 3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And by email, we're at bctoday@cbc.ca. It's 12:15 Pacific time. And as we've heard, the wildfire south of Jasper's town site prompted an evacuation order late last night. And thousands of residents and tourists have been forced to flee west into BC. Bowen Ma is Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, and here she is explaining to CBC's Stephen Quinn more about that this morning.
Alberta's plan right now is to evacuate residents through British Columbia and either turn them north to Grand Prairie or south to Calgary, where teams are going to be awaiting them in order to process supports for those thousands and thousands of evacuees. So British Columbians are doing everything that we can do to provide them with safe passage through to those major Albertan centres. Communities large and small along both routes, including Clearwater, but also Prince George to McBride, Belmont to Barrier and Kamloops, they have been working through the night to open gas stations and amenities, direct folks to rest stops, open welcome centers, and provide whatever support that we can as British Columbians, all while some of these communities themselves are already facing their own challenging wildfire situations.
And do we know, we just heard from Mayor Blackwell that it looks as though the fire is heading north toward Jasper. What do we know about what's happening on the ground there right now?
We know that when the evacuation order was issued for the people in Jasper and Jasper National Park of Jasper, the only safe direction for their thousands of residents and tourists was to go west along Highway 16 into British Columbia.
That's Bowen Ma, Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness. You call us now, let us know what's the impact of wildfire season on tourism. Does it need to change in light of wildfires? 1-800-825-5950. And some BC towns are welcoming those evacuees, including Kamloops, and especially those heading to Calgary via Highway 1. Now, the CBC's Liam Britton has been in Kamloops. Liam joins us now. Hello, Liam.
Hi, Michelle.
Can you get us up to date on where you are exactly?
Yeah, Michelle, I'm here at the Sandman Center here in Kamloops, home of the WHL's Kamloops Blazers. And it's also, as you can see, today it's home to a Salvation Army support truck, which is providing some resources to evacuees from Jasper who are passing through this community today. Now, we went to talk to some folks, and, some of them didn't really want to talk. And you can kind of see why when you looked at their faces. There was the stress, the exhaustion of last night. But we did speak with the Newstad family. They're from Hudson Valley, New York, and they were in Jasper for a holiday. But, with the fires, their plans changed, and they had to move quick.
Monday evening, we were just coming back from a hike around 8 p.m. Got back to the town, saw everyone scrambling to get gas, 30-plus cars at every station. We didn't really think much of it at the time. I mean, we felt like some explosion or something, and it started getting really, really dark out, and we could tell that there were fires going on. So we got back to town, tried to get food. All the restaurants were closing. There was an evacuation alert at the time. We kept going, grabbed something quick to eat, and by the time we were done eating and walking back to our hotel room, the evacuation alert had been issued to evacuation. Everyone was forced to vacate immediately. So we packed up our stuff, and within 20 minutes, we were on the road.
And so the Newstads are tourists, and tourists do outnumber residents in Jasper, sometimes by a wide margin. But I did catch up with one resident, Don Cackett, who is on the road from Jasper with his daughter's dog, Casey. And he said, while it was a real situation last night, he does think things went about as well as they could.
It was really smoky and a lot of ash in the sky, and I wasn't too concerned for myself, but my son has 3 little kids, and they had just brought a newborn home from the city the other day, and I was worried, concerned about the air quality and that kind of stuff, but they got out of town about the same time I did, so it's all good.
Interesting to hear from him. We heard from our guest earlier who had been in Jasper saying that it was quite smoky and she could see some ash as well. What is next for these evacuees now then in Kamloops?
Well, for the ones we just heard from, things are going to be okay for them. They've got plans. The Newstads, they're just rejigging their vacation. They're going to Banff instead of Jasper. not a bad fallback option. As for Don, he's heading west to Vancouver Island to join his wife, who's already on vacation. So he's heading west, but the advice from Albertan officials for people from that province who need support is to head east, take Highway 1 out of Kamloops and head to an emergency reception center in Calgary. Officials, as you heard from the emergency minister, saying that with the wildfire situation already ongoing in this province, it's going to be hard to accept evacuees from another province as well. Michelle.
Liam, thank you so much for your work on this. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
You take care. That's Liam Britton, CBC reporter, and he was live in Kamloops. Well, as those Jasper evacuees made their slow journey along Highway 16 onto the Coquihalla overnight, they passed through towns like Valemount and then Clearwater. Merlin Blackwell is the mayor of Clearwater, and he joins me now. Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tell us what your day has been like, Mayor. What have you met any evacuees today?
Yes, definitely. I met some very early this morning, went out around town and checked things out about 5 o'clock, and started to see people sleeping in their cars. A lot of them huddle around the shopping mall, Tim Hortons, Sportsplex, and some of our public bathrooms. So there's definitely a presence of evacuees passing through town. But I think Valemount got the brunt of it last night. We got the people that couldn't fit into Valemount and started coming down towards Kamloops our way.
And what is the capacity in Clearwater like?
Well, we're pretty have a large capacity as a tourism town, and we're not quite in peak tourism season. So most of our hotel rooms were full, but there's definitely places for people to put RVs and things like that. We have public bathrooms. We got those open fairly early. I was in contact with Minister Ma overnight and with the mayor of Valemount, and we were sort of strategizing as to who would need what when. So the call went out yesterday evening to the local gas stations and other places to, maybe have some more staff on this morning to take on some of the extra people coming in through town today.
Right. And what is it that evacuees need as they arrive?
They need gasoline. They need a place to go to the bathroom, place to get off the road and have a snooze to refresh. Definitely, those are the big three. And, as you're saying, the Jasper residents are probably going to circle back through Kamloops, Banff into Alberta for long-term services. But we're also in the height of tourism season right now. It pretty much ramps up to BC Day long weekend. That's the busiest time. But a lot of the people being displaced are self-contained in RVs. A lot of them are Europeans and rental motorhomes. So a lot of people like that are showing up in Clearwater probably 3 or 4 days ahead of their itinerary. The people probably most affected, though, which are going to suffer the worst consequences of this, other than the residents of Jasper, are the people traveling by tour bus or traveling by car, drive-in stays, because their accommodation in a very busy tourism market isn't going to be available to them for 2 or 3 days or 1 or 2 days until their itinerary says they're going to be in our neck of the woods or Kamloops or wherever the next stop was. So I think there's going to be a whole bunch of people scrambling to find places to stay in a part of BC that already is seeing evacuees from the Spence's Bridge, Ashcroft fire situation right now.
And as you mentioned, it is the height of the tourist season. I mean, what impact do you think this has overall on tourism?
This is not good, obviously. The Rocky Mountain area, Banff and Jasper, that's part of a circuit loop where rental motorhomes either start out in Abbotsford or in Calgary. People get off the planes, they drive a circuit. Part of that is going to Wells Gray and through our area. Often it ends up going onto Vancouver Island or parts of the Caribou. But that interrupts that cycle. And when that cycle's thrown out of whack, that means that basically all the reservation stops along the way are out of cycle as well. Long term, obviously, with climate change and the effects of smoke, I think the BC tourism industry really needs to start pushing an earlier start to the season into April and a later start well into October for this sort of destination travel that we're seeing from around the world. Because, I started working in tourism when I was 12 years old in 1982 in BC Parks and only finished up about 5 years ago when I became mayor. But that's a huge industry. A lot of it is European, and we really need to start thinking about refocusing it outside of August. August used to be Christmas. It's where we made 45% of our income, and I don't think that's going to happen anymore with closures, smoke, fires, etc.
How much earlier should it start then?
I think as early as snow flies or comes off, at either end. So we traditionally in Clearwater started May. I think we need to start in April, mid-April, and start booking in people sooner. There's still lots to see here. Everything was accessible by the first week of April as far as the waterfalls and stuff in Wells Gray this year. But we need to elongate that season to reduce the risk of having sort of wiped out areas like we are going to probably see through this summer, through August with the heat we're seeing right now.
It's an interesting thought, Mayor, and I'm sure one that will prompt discussion. Thank you so much for your time and all the best as you deal with the effects of these wildfires.
Thank you.
That's Merlin Blackwell, Mayor of Clearwater. And we are asking you, what are your thoughts on what he's suggesting there? Start the tourist season earlier in the year in light of wildfire season. Does tourism need to change in light of these more frequent wildfire seasons that we're seeing yearly? And if you're planning a trip right now, is this a concern for you? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And Roman is calling us from Port Alberni. Hi, Roman.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So the one thing I keep thinking of when we're talking about all of the question you're asking repeatedly, and thank you for doing so, is this quote: the best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is right now. And realizing that the fruits of a tree won't be there for us, we should at least start talking about what are the impacts of the ecological footprint change that happens during any tourist season, no matter what time of the year it takes place. All the extra bodies, all the extra resource needs, and all the extra amenities that have to come into play put a severe impact on the watershed and everything else in a regional area. And I wonder if we're going to be gathering metrics such as that rather than just the dollars that roll in or roll out from tourist season arriving and taking its journey through our province. Because at the end of the day, I think we are all responsible for preserving what is really a gem on this globe. But I think we might be chipping away at it if we're not planning it properly with protecting our water, protecting the resources, limiting scope of activities. You know what I mean?
Do you see limiting tourism then? Limiting tourism, is that what you're...
Well, you asked how tourism should change. I think the kind of activities that are available,
Yeah.
We see a lot in the valley of fires caused inadvertently by dirt bikes or other motor vehicles, small motor vehicles going into trails. Stuff like that normally we never had to think of. It's here now. We've got to think of it. Be a little smarter in what we allow people to do when the population grows from 1,000 or 2,000 people to 5,000 or 10,000 people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
As we heard from Liam there, right, in Jasper, at this time, tourists outnumber residents.
And if can I leave one parting note?
Sure.
Along with strategic planning, access in and out in the event of an emergency. I'm going to say it again, Highway 4 is a prime example.
Yeah, we certainly saw that last year, Roman. Thank you so much. Good to hear from you.
Thank you.
That's Roman in Port Alberni. Robin is next now in North Vancouver. Does tourism need to change, Robin?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Yes, I think tourism we all have to change. Everything has to change. There can be, too many people going to a certain place at a certain time. Some of the local parks on the shore, I've noticed over the last 10 years, what was just almost nothing of a trail is now a big wide trail, which is, down to the rocks. There's so many people on them. So it does affect nature and also people's carelessness with campfires. And as it was mentioned before, motorbikes out in the middle of the wilderness, they can spark a fire and nobody even knows about it until suddenly it's a huge fire. So I don't think that is good tourism. I think good tourism is non-motorized, and so that's kind of risky to have, engines out there in the tinderbox. But apart from that, my thought on this whole conversation is what really needs to change is tourism is wonderful for our economy, but what really needs to change is the clear-cut logging, which is affecting everything and causing so many, fires to go out of control because it exposes the land to all the sunlight, and the trees are gone, so it's low shrubs and dried out branches and stuff like that. And so once a fire starts, it's a tinderbox. So without doing something about the clear-cut logging and saving our last forests, it's just that the fires are out of control, and it's just incredible what's happening. If you look at a satellite map of British Columbia, it's like a patchwork of clear cuts. It's just incredible. I encourage everybody just to go on Google Maps or whatever and have a look at what the patchwork of clear cuts is, because we don't have the forests that the image that the Europeans who are coming here, they want to see our forests.
What tourists want to see may not be there any longer.
Exactly.
Robin, thank you so much for the call. Good to hear from you in North Vancouver. Take care. Barry wrote us as well. It's even more difficult for cycling tourists. It's hard to outrun a fire if you are breathing smoke. I have been too close to fires touring in BC at least 3 times in Sayward, Valemount, and Anarchist Mountain. There needs to be radio warnings outside cell range. And Randy writes, it's a good day to present the apparent contradiction of driving to vacation spots in carbon-fueled vehicles for enjoyment while our planet suffers from the effects of man-made climate change. Maybe choose a staycation. Learn to love what is around you and use less fuel. Randy and Barry, thank you for your emails, and thanks for all of your calls. If you want to let us know more about your thoughts on this, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. 12:32 now. You're with BC Today. We're live on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming too on YouTube. I'm Michelle Elliott. Good to be with you this afternoon. And coming up, we're going to talk about using cash to pay for just about everything. That doesn't happen anymore, does it? Now we're using cards most often. So what does that transition look like, that transition to a cashless society? We're going to take your calls on that coming up after this CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The federal government says it has signed 2 important health agreements with BC worth $426 million. Health Minister Mark Holland says the agreement makes sure workers get an appropriate salary and will help in recruiting new staff. The second agreement will see $194 million set aside for access to new medications and treatments for rare diseases. As we've been hearing on the show, hundreds of fires are burning across BC, but much of the focus today is working to help evacuees from the Jasper area. Minister Bowen Maw says communities have been working through the night to help people fleeing from the wildfire threatening that community. Residents and visitors were told to take Highway 16 into BC rather than heading farther east into Alberta, where highways have been closed. And the Vancouver Park Board has voted to pass an appropriate swimwear policy at pools. The guidelines allow bathing suits, swim trunks, bikinis, and wetsuits, but prohibit items designed for a sexual or intimate purpose, as well as long flowing fabrics or jeans and sweatpants. And now the forecast: heat and thunderstorm warnings continue for several sections of the province. On the north coast, a chance of showers and thunderstorms this afternoon with a high of 18, highs to 19 with a chance of showers and some sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, highs up to 18 and hazy with a mix of sun and cloud. Sunny and hazy in the Kootenays with a high of 33. In the southern interior, sunny with highs around 29. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, lots of sunshine this afternoon with highs to 23 degrees. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Rob. That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You're with BC Today. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you're having a good day so far. We were talking about whether tourism needs to shift in light of more frequent wildfire seasons. And Scott sent us an email from New West. We were just in Kamloops on the weekend for the soccer provincials. Games had to be shifted to end before noon so athletes wouldn't face the 36-plus heat stress as recommended in the Paris Olympics. It does look like many areas on Earth will have months when the heat prohibits travel, and the interior of BC will be very affected in July and August now and in the future. That's a really interesting point, Scott, that shifting the day based on the temperatures as well when you hit the top temperatures and how hot that becomes. It's something that certainly people think about these days. Lots of stories throughout the day here on CBC, and here's what's coming up on the Coast.
Hi there, Michelle. It's Gloria Macarenko here, inviting you to join us for On the Coast this afternoon on CBC Radio. According to new research, living in Metro Vancouver stinks. Yeah, so on the show today, our reporter Chad Pawson is going to tell us about a citizen-driven data project about bad odors in our neighborhoods. Now, we all know Chad as a nose-to-the-ground kind of reporter, so he'll be here to tell us about the Smell Vancouver project. Can't wait to hear more about that. Now, also, if I asked you who was behind a project ranking every single Disney song on a scale of 0 to 500, you would probably guess our friend and colleague Justin McElroy was behind it. But Justin's on sabbatical right now. And it turns out there's a UBC music theory professor who has a similar interest in rankings.
Well, do you remember the last time you paid for something with cold, hard cash? Yes, do you even have cash in your wallet right now? More people are relying just on using their card or their phone perhaps to pay. Well, the CBC's Shivani Joshi asked people in Vancouver what they prefer.
Card on vacation. It's just easier to have than cash.
Cash or card? Oh, I prefer card. Card, yeah.
I just prefer card, and I don't like change, so I just carry cards, and it's even in my wallet or in my phone.
Well, now it seems more businesses and venues simply no longer accept cash. You may have seen those signs yourself. You know, you step up to the counter and you see a sign on the counter that says debit or credit only. But there is a growing push to make it law, to require continued access to using cash. We'll hear more about a private members bill in just a moment. And we also want to hear from you. We're taking your calls on this. Do you still rely on using cash, or do you think it should be mandatory to allow continued access to cash? And what is the impact of going cashless? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or hit pound 690 on your phone. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, Manitoba Conservative MP Ted Falk has just put forward a private members bill to ensure continued access to use of cash. And it's calling for the protection of cash as a viable method of payment. And he spoke to the CBC program Cost of Living.
You know, I took my grandson to watch a Winnipeg Jets game, and I thought I would buy him a hot dog and a drink. And so we went to a vendor and I presented cash, and he said, "Oh, sorry, we don't accept cash." And I said, "Okay, well, maybe I'll just go to one of the other vendors in the Canada Life Center there." And then they told me, "No, we're completely cashless here. You either have debit or credit, but that's it." I said, "Really? Well, what if I didn't have that?" Well, they said, "Then you're going hungry." So fortunately, I mean, I did have both. I had both the debit and the credit, and I used a credit card, and I bought a hot dog and a pop for the two of us, and just made me think, well, what if I didn't have a credit card or a debit card? And I began doing research there, and I found out that 15% of Canadians are either unbanked or underbanked, which means they may not have access to those kinds of vehicles to conduct their financial business. Every time you make a electronic transaction, I'm not even talking digital necessarily, but an electronic financial transaction, you're exchanging private information. When you use cash, it's completely anonymous. The other thing, cash doesn't require access to the internet, and cash doesn't require electricity. Whereas both the other forms, either debit or credit or digital, all three forms, require access to the internet and also electricity. Bill C-400 is putting a timetable forward for the Minister of Finance to conduct a review and to draft a framework that would provide guidance for the provinces in developing their cash policies. There isn't any province that requires a vendor to accept cash or territory. And we know that people in more remote communities, northern communities, are higher users of cash than those in urban centers. certainly the move is to move more towards cashless and more digital. And yet I think there's a significant desire and need for cash to be in the system. And that's all my bill does. What my bill does is it requires the finance minister to establish a framework. Look at all the different aspects, bring in different stakeholders, from disadvantaged group, newcomers, people living in remote communities, lower income people. Talk to them, consider their needs, but talk to the business communities, talk to the chambers, talk to the big banks, and let's together come up with a framework that works for everybody.
Ted Falk is the Manitoba Conservative MP for Provencher. Well, we're asking you, do you still rely on using cash? Do you think it should be required to allow cash as a form of payment? And what is the impact of a cashless society? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And in a few moments, we're going to hear how relying on cards can actually mean that you end up spending more. We'll hear from someone who's an expert in marketing and behavioral sciences as well. Right now, Cam is joining us from Cobble Hill.
Hello, yes.
Hi, Cam. Yes, what are your thoughts on cash only?
Well, I can give you an example. It's actually applicable to what's going on now. Now, in May, I went up the Stewart-Cassiar Highway and got to Dees Lake, and my son's truck needed gasoline and my pickup needed gasoline. And because of the fires at Fort Nelson, their internet was down. You couldn't pay with a credit card. You could only pay with cash.
Right.
And I think I had $3,000 in cash between the two of us. Well, needless to say, I could buy $300 worth of gas and pay for it with cash. So
you were lucky that you had that on you.
Well, yeah, and even at home, I keep $2,000 or $3,000 in $5 and $10 bills.
Wow.
In case there's an earthquake or something, nothing's going to work, and nobody thinks of that. And I think it's a very applicable thing.
Yeah, and you're right. The concern with the fires right now.
Yeah.
We've heard, obviously with the issues last week.
There were people waiting there for the internet to come back so they could use a credit card because they didn't have any cash.
Right.
Whereas I was able to fill up with gasoline.
Yeah.
Because they had power, but they had no internet.
Yeah. Cam, a really good point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
That's Cam at Cobble Hill. Patrick is on the line now in Vancouver. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Michelle, it's your favorite caller, Patrick.
Yeah, excellent, Patrick. Thanks for calling. So what do you think? The cashless society, is that the right way to go? Or?
Yeah, I totally agree with the previous caller. And just to add to their point, I always carry around a little bit of cash. I pay by card most of the time because I like the points on my credit card.
Right.
But to add to his point, last Friday, we had this huge global outage that affected a lot of people, specifically point-of-sale systems. And then, if you look at the homeless population, a lot of these people don't have access to a bank, right? They don't have a debit card or even a credit card for that matter. So, not allowing, there's some cafes in my neighborhood that do not accept cash. And I kind of think it's I don't know, I don't think it's right, to be honest. I think we should have cash. I carry cash with me all the time. Like the previous caller, I have, I have an emergency fund in cash, just in case of an earthquake. It's in my little readiness prepared kit with first aid and dried food and stuff. But yeah, I think we've become so accustomed to paying by debit and credit card that we kind of take it for granted that you need that backup. You should have something on you at all times.
Yeah, Patrick, a really good point. I'm glad you brought up that IT outage last week because that's certainly something that's been on people's minds. Thanks for the call. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's Patrick in Vancouver. That's something our guest, Mark Ting, mentioned last week as well, that he always just tends to have cash with him because he does also, on the other side of things, come across businesses that only take cash. So he happens to have some with him at all times. And we are taking your calls on this. Do you remember the last time you used cash, or do you have cash just in your wallet, just standing by as an emergency stash? And should it be mandatory that venues and vendors allow cash and take cash as a form of payment? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Are you noticing more of those businesses like the coffee shops that Patrick mentioned, where they say they don't take cash and they only take credit or debit? I've certainly seen them myself. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And Craig writes us, in fact, how many times have you hit the Starbucks or Timmy's drive-through and the machines are down and the cash-only sign is out? Many just drive on through. During large outages like the Rogers one last year, there's another one, with no cash on hand, you were at the mercy of internet providers for days. It should be law to accept all forms of legal Canadian tender. Thanks so much for the email, Craig. Sandra is calling us now from Chilliwack. Hi, Sandra.
Hello.
Hi, what are your thoughts on this? Do you use cash?
Yes, I do. My businesses have high turnover of staff. I don't trust high turnover.
Why is that?
Well, there's too many clerks and cashiers rotating through. I just consider that a security risk.
Like a privacy issue. Okay.
Yes, and so I'll use a credit card where when point of sales are actually working, because sometimes they aren't. But I'll use it for larger businesses where I've been assured that everything's secure.
So it's the security of it as well. Certainly privacy has come up too. Sandra, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Tim is next in Prince George. Hi, Tim. What are your thoughts on using cards versus cash?
Yeah, good afternoon, Michelle. My son and I, we got caught traveling to Vancouver a few years ago when there was the flooding in the lower mainland. And we got landlocked in Hope. We were hopelessly stuck there. And it was the people who had cash that were able to buy fuel and food because the power was down and debit and credit cards weren't being processed. So we were able to get food and fuel.
This was during the atmospheric river.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so that's just an example where those who had cash, those who had sleeping beds, the people who had prepared, for like the other callers have been mentioning, for the unexpected times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think also, God forbid if we ever had a tyrannical government that would want to, freeze bank accounts and people were unable to, purchase medicines and food and what have you. I think cash is definitely beneficial.
Tim, thank you very much for the call. Really hearing from people who have cash and how it's helped them in those instances when things were just down. We have an email right now from Tanya, who writes, I use cash on the go daily, and I've taught my kids to budget using cash. I can vouch that when you spend cash, you make more thought-through decisions than just throwing your phone at a retailer's wand or just tapping your card without even putting in a PIN code. It just lets us reflect more on how we are spending. When the cash is gone, the spending is done. A really interesting point, Tanya. Thank you very much. There's actually a bit of research into that very point. And we're going to hear now from someone who's done that research, who says we do think a little less about our purchases when we're paying on card. Tim Silk is Associate Professor of Marketing and Behavioral Science at the Sauder School of Business at UBC. And I spoke to him this morning. I asked him first how often people depend on using cards.
Well, I think it's pretty uncommon to pay with cash now, but I'm worried that it changes your sensitivity to how you feel. Something we call the pain of paying, and seeing money leave your wallet, leave your pocket, physical, does have an impact on. We kind of visualize it coming out of our budget when we tap or pay with our phone. We don't get that pain of paying, and so it's something that is likely
until you get your statement.
Yeah, well, yeah, and you've already spent the money. But I can't speak to what proportion of the population is still paying with cash. I would I'd have to look that up. But we ran some experiments where we manipulated whether people were paying with money out of their pocket or paying with gift cards, which was still their own money. And they're less price sensitive and more willing to pay. So, I mean, yes, if it's something that you want, you're going to buy it, but are you sensitive to how much you're paying for it? And that can be affected.
And what should consumers keep in mind then, given what you found in terms of how their behavior is affected by how they pay?
So the big thing is we're not conscious of this. We're not self-aware of it at the time, right? We're obviously thinking about what we're buying. In the back of our mind, we know it's our money, but we are not self-aware that we're less price sensitive when we're not using cash. And if you think of, a lot of things with financial literacy are learned and passed down from, generation to generation. I remember as a kid, my first, bank book, right? Back in the days where banks actually had these bank books, and you would go and you'd look at your bank statement. And I was taught at a young age, to be mindful of that. A lot of kids have piggy banks, right? And we learn our first associations with money tend to be with cash or with coins. Right, kids in school are learning to count based upon quarters and dimes and things like that. That's very healthy. When we reach an age where we get either our own credit card or a credit card that's issued to our parents, a lot of that socialization, we don't have that pain of paying. We don't see the cash leaving our mouth. So you think of a 10-year-old kid dumping a bunch of quarters at the corner store, and what can I buy with this, right? And they'll be like, well, you can have 2 of these or 4 of those. Those are really, really good learning opportunities where we learn the value of money and the trade-offs between buying A versus B, and how do we maximize our value. In economics, call it maximizing our utility. And we may not use that language as everyday consumers, but that's exactly what we're trying to do. So, I would be very concerned if there is a bill proposing that we ensure that cash is allowed and that it would be prohibitive and illegal to say that you can't use cash. I'd be all for that bill. The governments may not be aware of this. This research that we did was of interest in the U.S. A lot of U.S. states issue child support bonus, things like baby bonus payments, using prepaid cards, and that was done for efficiency because the Federal Reserve in the U.S. was getting rid of the check system. And when we showed that you're less price sensitive using a gift card, even though it's your money, compared to other payment formats, it was a big concern to social services because you're like, wow, we're issuing welfare checks and we're issuing baby bonus checks on gift cards, and if that means that people are actually going to be less careful in how they spend that money, that's a real concern. So, most of us have automatic deposit, from our employer. Sometimes we get paid by check. Sometimes I remember my first jobs as a kid being paid cash. Now, the money goes in and the money goes out, and I kind of miss that. Imagine if you got paid in cash and you had to go to the bank and deposit your earnings. I think that would be a very good thing for us to be like, wow, look at this, look at all this money that I have for this 2 weeks of hard work. And, it's gone sometimes before it's spent. So
yeah, you may hold on to it. That's true.
Yeah.
And you mentioned efficiency there. Perhaps, it also entices you to pay more. What is the motivation for banks or for agencies, institutions to turn further toward plastic?
Well, one, it's good for the banks and for the credit card companies. They make money in 2 ways. So, of course, you pay interest if you don't pay off your bill. And if you're paying off your bill, then no problem. And if you've got good self-control. But there's also something called a transaction or interchange fee. So every time we tap that debit card, the banks are making a bit of money from the vendors in terms of per transaction. And it used to be 5 cents per transaction. I don't know what it is now. The consumer's not paying for that. That's coming out of the pricing of the system. But there is a financial motivation for the banks to encourage those systems. When you put down a $20 bill, the bank is not making money on that transaction.
So what's your advice then? Because people, regardless of what the laws are, they seem to be choosing to go with the easier option of paying with their card. What's your advice for consumers?
It's totally reasonable. We hate carrying the change in our pocket. Using a debit card is super convenient, so no worries about that. But just be aware that you don't feel that pain of paying. And it would be just an interesting experiment. Take a week and just use cash, and just see if it changes how you feel by the end of the week. Right? Just go about your way the normal way you would, but don't use a debit or credit card for 1 week. Use cash. And just see how you feel at the end of it. You probably feel a little bit worse. You're like, oh my God, I didn't enjoy things as much because I saw that money leaving. But I think it's a really interesting experiment we can do with ourselves.
I may just try that. Tim Silk, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Good luck.
That's Tim Silk from Sauder School of Business. Interesting, I saw a sign in one of our visuals that we were showing. The sign said, due to theft, that they were only taking cards. So that's an interesting point as well from businesses. Brenda is our next caller from Coquitlam. Hi, Brenda. Do you use cash?
Just very quickly.
Yeah.
I am a blind person, and a lot of people do not realize that our bills have Braille on them. I can't read Braille, but I can recognize the bumps that are different on the bills. And also the coins are different sizes, different shapes, and have different edges on them.
So it's important to you to have continued access then to cash?
Yes, exactly.
Brenda, really important point. Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me air my grievance here.
Great to hear from you. That's Brenda in Coquitlam. And Polly is in Kelowna now. Thanks for waiting, Polly.
Hi.
Yes, do you use cash?
Absolutely. I have some on hand all the time for many reasons. I mean, the internet is always going down. Many people don't know, but it's a solar cycle, a high solar cycle we're in. So there's a lot of sun flares that come in and take out internet. Look what happened with the truckers. It's a privacy thing.
Okay.
And I think everyone
okay.
Emergencies, but also
for emergencies.
Also, it should be absolutely made that it has to be that businesses accept cash. I'd say.
Polly, thank you very much. My apologies. You're starting to cut out there, and I'm sorry about that. This is, we're talking about this because of this private members bill that was presented by Ted Falk, MP in Manitoba. Bill C-400 seeks to establish a framework for continued access to and use of cash in Canada. Thank you so much for all of your calls. Lovely to hear from you. Great to hear your experiences and your opinions on this. You can email us on this to bctoday@cbc.ca. And Lee writes, I usually get paid in cash, so most often I buy things with cash. It makes me so mad to see the credit or debit only signs. Thanks so much for your email as well. bctoday@cbc.ca.